All right, this week we're going to continue talking about communication, specifically focusing on conflict resolution. So, one of the big things that people struggle with are when conflicts come up. Um, and there's some things to know. So, number one, disagreeing or arguing occasionally with people is totally normal, right? We don't all agree on things, we don't all get along, and that is okay. And some people stress out about, like myself included, about tackling conflicts because we're not sure how they're going to play out, or someone may, like, it could get worse or something else. So knowing how to navigate them is key. These conflicts when you're in college are probably going to come up more in, like, say, group projects when you're trying to figure out who's doing what, or who is supposed to do what usually. But they're also, you're going to see them as in other places as well, right? Like your coworkers, your partner if you're in a relationship, your friends, family, etc. So we're going to go over some tips and steps for kind of navigating situations where conflicts could come up or are coming up. So the first thing I'm going to cover is what they call the STIP method. So this is a method that you can use if there's a situation or something that's bothering you and you want to bring it up with somebody and you're not really quite sure how to phrase it, or like just the order of it. So the STIP method can help work with that. So STIP stands for situation, impact, and pull. So it's just those three steps. So the first thing is the situation. So the first step is to describe the situation as you see it, from your perspective, what you think is going on. And then I is for impact. So you talk about how the situation has impacted you, why it's bothering you, how it affects you. And then pull is to ask for the other person's perspective or how they're seeing it, or for their input. So for example, if you're frustrated that, your partner doesn't put the dishes in the dishwasher immediately after you wash them, just let them sit there. So how would you approach this in this example? In this example would be, you would sit down and be like, all right, look, the situation is, there's a problem that every time you do the dishes, you wash them, you just let them sit in the sink, and you don't put them in the dishwasher immediately. That bothers me because it clogs up the sink area. I can't wash other dishes, and I just don't understand. Like, it frustrates me, and I'm becoming more and more irritated and frustrated. Like, is this how you see the situation? Like, what's your perspective on this? So that would be a way kind of opening up the conversation about something. I'm going to give another example here, from the Black Widow movie with Yelena. Is they're talking about, like, their family that they made of spies was essentially fake. They were faking everything. So Yelena finally brings it up that, like, the situation was that their family was fake, and everyone was like, oh, it meant nothing, they were just faking it. And the impact that Yelena was complaining about was that she felt her family was real. It was real to her. So she's feeling hurt and betrayed and very dismissed about a situation because she felt it was really important. And then the poll actually is her, like, leaving the room and kind of letting the other people sit with those feelings and what she said. And then Red Guardian ends up going to her to cheer her up and talking about, and they end up having a nice heart-to-heart moment of how he actually did enjoy, like, raising her and working with her and all of that. Now, as you're going through this, conversation, because the step is really just to bring up a situation or something that's bothering you. And then as you're going through, kind of, because then you can start having a conversation, there's other things to keep in mind. So number one, as you're talking about it, you're listening to whoever you're discussing this with, number one is to be honest in a couple of different ways. So number one is to be honest with how the situation is impacting you. Like, don't try to minimize it. Don't try to hide your feelings or how frustrated it's making you feel, because the other person's not going to have the full information or realize, like, how frustrating it is to you or how it's impacting you. The other thing too is sometimes when we hide our feelings or we act like it's not a big deal, they start to build up over time and it starts causing resentment, and we don't want that. We want to resolve the situation. And even if they may get frustrated with it or get hurt by it, it's important to be honest with each other. Be kind about it, but, like, be honest. Don't be like, well, it's not really that big of a deal. No, it is a big deal to you, and that's okay. The other flip side of being honest is if you're arguing about something that, well, you said X, Y, Z, before, and that made me mad, is to be honest about what you've said. If someone is accusing you of something you said, own it. If that's what you said, own it. Like, and clarify. If it's maybe like, well, I didn't mean it like that, clarify that, but don't hide what you said. Here I've got Agatha from Agatha All Along, and she's being honest about how many people she's killed, which is a lot. And the other thing too is to recognize as you're talking and having these conversations is that everyone makes mistakes, including ourselves. So just be aware that maybe listen to the other person and recognize that we all kind of make mistakes. Another part is when you're talking these things out with people is remembering to apologize. This is a big thing. Apologizing can go a very long way in mending fences, in rebuilding that trust, that respect. So apologize if you hurt someone's feelings or if they said something or if you said something wrong. When someone else says that you hurt me, blah, 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 you don't get to say, oh, well, no, I didn't really do it. Apologize, say sorry. And here we can see Anakin Skywalker, also known as Darth Vader. He's apologizing to Obi-Wan Kenobi. So if Darth Vader can apologize, so can you. The other thing too is that sometimes conflicts can come from mismatched expectations. So basically someone thought A and the other person thought B, and that's sometimes where the conflicts arise. So if you're discussing something and you realize like, oh, you were on 2 different pages or you thought 2 different things, kind of clarify those expectations. Make sure everyone's on the same page. Remind, people of things if you had this based on a previous discussion of those things, and kind of like hash out what everyone needs to be aware of. So an example of this is I'm going to use The Lion King. So in the beginning of the movie, Simba sees Mufasa as this brave, courageous lion, right? And Simba wants to be exactly like Mufasa. And we all know, right, like Mufasa tells Simba to avoid the elephant graveyard. Well, Simba goes anyway, partly because he's a kid and that's what they do, but partly because he wants to be brave, right? Like he wants to be just like Mufasa. He wants to be brave and courageous. So he goes to the elephant graveyard to kind of attempt to scare off the hyenas. We all know that doesn't work. Simba gets into trouble and gets trapped by the hyenas, and Mufasa ends up having to rescue him. So what happens later is, when they're having that conversation, is that they realize that Simba says he wanted to be brave just like Mufasa, and that's when we get the line from Mufasa of I'm only brave when I have to be. Being brave doesn't mean you go looking for trouble. And they realize that they're on 2 different pages, right? 2 different pages. Simba thought being brave meant I'm gonna go pick a fight with people, whereas Mufasa's no, being brave just means when you have to, not you don't just go picking fights. And they have that heart-to-heart moment and kind of that clarifying moment of oh, this is actually what it means. So that's an example of how to clarify expectations. The other thing to remember as you're having either an argument or a fight or whatever, disagreement with somebody, is remembering that it's okay to agree to disagree sometimes. Obviously, this depends on the topic, and you get to pick that topic. We'll go to that in a second. Sometimes we can't come to an agreement on something, and that's okay. Just agree to disagree, and you get to decide what's important for you to kind of step away from that conversation. Right? And that's up to you, right? Some things are more important to other people, some things are not. That's up to you whether you want to continue, just to say continue and find a solution, or whether you want to say, you know what, this isn't worth it. You have your opinion, I have mine, and we're just going to leave it at that. Because sometimes stepping away from the argument, agreeing to disagree, it's not worth the stress to continue that conversation. So knowing kind of that stopping point, and that's just really kind of trial and error as you're talking with people. Kind of check in with yourself, kind of where your stress levels are at, and kind of realize, is this worth the conversation? Is this worth the argument? Yes, no. I said that's completely up to you to decide what that is. So a quick example of this is in the movie Lilo and Stitch, right? Lilo believes that Stitch is a dog, right? She goes to adopt a dog. She treats him like a dog. She trains him, right? Throughout the movie. But here she says he used to be a collie before he got run over. Everyone in the movie knows that Stitch isn't a dog, right? It's the running gag, right? That's an ugly looking dog. Are you sure it's a dog? Right? But they let Lilo believe it anyway, because it's not worth arguing with a little kid about that. Just let her believe it's a dog. It's not worth it. They're fine. And obviously we get a really great movie out of that. The important thing, regardless of how you're using these steps, how you're going through it, is to remember that conflict resolution is about finding a solution. It's not about winning an argument. It's about finding a compromise between 2 people or coming to some sort of solution about whatever you're talking about, whatever you're arguing about. It's not necessarily about who's right and who's wrong. It's about moving forward together over whatever you're discussing about. So hopefully you guys found this helpful. Hopefully you can maybe try out Couple tips. If you're looking for one like tip or thing to like, I need to try that, I definitely recommend the SIP method. I use it all the time at work when I'm trying to like bring up things with people. I use it with family members. I find it really helpful, so I would definitely recommend that one if you had to pick one. Hope you guys have a great rest of the week.